present that. I'm grateful. So my first lecture of the morning is going to be about addressing model defects in AnyLogic, and I have a whole bunch of slides here that I'm not going to be able to do justice to. Really, this has to do with addressing one of the two questions. Thus far in the boot camp, we've talked a fair bit, but by no means really done full justice to this question of have we built the right model. What we're dealing here is, have we built the model right? Have we actually constructed the model that we had in mind? Is that something that we've actually implemented, that we've actually achieved? Or have we actually achieved something inadvertently that's off base from what we intended? Have we built the model right? Did we really implement it as we intended? Did we make some silly mistake? Did we make some oversight? Did we say one thing we meant another, for example? And here the lapse is often a model defect. It could be a build error, it could be a bug, and we'll be dealing with sort of identifying and grappling with this sort of thing at a very high level. I will come later to some critical processes that can help in this a great deal. Things like peer review, for example, things like model testing that can help raise confidence in a model. And personally, I see these as absolutely essential, one or both of these things in the model context. So peer reviews, pair modeling, having two people working together on the same model, or having one person look over the model created by another, helping to look for issues, cross-check. We heard from yesterday from Sarah on some of the value that this obtained with 1E. Sarah's a very, very nice, well-done model, but having that extra pair of eyes going over it was of real help to her in identifying issues that had remained latent. And so, while we're going to be talking here about sleuthing down the source of problems in this whole challenge of have we built the model right, bear in mind that one of the key, as they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And when it comes to peer reviews, it's one of the most powerful things you can do for a model to advance model quality, but also to share model understanding and to spread skill sets and to enhance ideas. So I'd like to talk with you about two classes of issues, and we're going to be spending more time on the second one, but that's not privileging it in terms of importance. So the first topic is build errors. Within AnyLogic, we go through a process, and I described this early on in the boot camp, a process called building a model. Now, what's involved here, and you can go back and look at my slide if you wanted to. It was one of the very first lectures. I talked about build being something where you have a model specification in place. Think about your state charts, think about your populations, think about your events, those sort of things. You have that in place. You've been building that up, and then you want to turn it into a form where it can be run. Where the model can actually run over time. It can actually produce results. And to do that, AnyLogic needs to make sense of your specification. It needs to understand what you mean by your model to turn into something that it can run. Make it operational. It needs to understand what you mean by your model specification. And a lot of the time that's done transparently. So for example, if you're in AnyLogic and you've modified something in your model and you click on run, it will automatically build it, check it, produce, if it's correct, it will produce the resulting output so it can be run, the so-called Java bytecode, and then it will allow you to run it. But sometimes something goes wrong in that, and there's problems put in the build menu. One of the most strong pieces of advice I could give you is if you're modifying your model, build early and build often. What I mean by that is you can actually explicitly request that the model be built by this model build command. Interestingly, I am missing this little, maybe this is something Scott can comment on, to have the little icons up here, because it occasionally capriciously disappears for me. And it doesn't seem to be under the view menu for one of the options.
Sometimes it happens to me too. I can't tell you exactly what's going on. I think it's under tools and preferences maybe.
Oh, okay.
But that's just a guess.
Yeah, so I won't fob it right now. But there's a button up here for build, which allows you to press it to build the current project, or you can say build all projects that are currently on there. If you hover over the button, you'll see it. Alternatively, you can use model build here. And I would encourage you to do that very, very frequently when you're modifying the model. Why? Because the more frequently you can do it, the less difference there'll be from fewer things that will have changed since the last time you do it. And if there is a problem, you know it. You have a much better sense of where that problem lies. If you've done a whole bunch of things, made 20 changes to the model or 50 changes to the model since the last time you built, and then you get a builder, you don't know which of those 50 changes. Sometimes you get multiple things at once, and you have to wade through them. And as Scott emphasized early in the boot camp, sometimes just one of those errors causes a whole bunch more, and so it looks more fearsome than it really is. If you can do this frequently, while it's fresh in your mind what you just did, it lets you zero in on what the problem is very quickly, and helps you change course if you have to change course to sort of adapt to the situation. So so here doing model build is strongly recommended, but sometimes fate smiles upon you and sometimes fate frowns upon you, and it's and you'll get messages in the build window, okay, down here. So I did note that the need for continuous integration. If you do get a build there, what you need to do is to take it serious, a build problem. I showed this early on in the bootcamp, examples of some build problems, but they can be caused for everything from a hanging transition in a model, in other words, a transition that doesn't go anywhere or doesn't come from anywhere, to a name that's illegal within your model. Sometimes we'd like to name things according to our convention, and it turns out that it runs afoul of Java. Java can be very picky. Sometimes if you have something capitalized as the name and you try to refer to it as a lowercase, it will be unhappy. And all these are things that can occur in the build window, okay? These are things that we can track down through having it report things to us. So just to give you a sense of this, I'm going to cause one of these problems right now. So for example, I'll have an event go off, and I'll say, I want this event to go off, immigration event, okay? And I want it to go off with a rate as defined by some parameter. So I'll drag in a parameter here. So immigration rate, okay? And in this immigration event, I will have it go off with a rate of immigration rate, but I'll put in wrong capitalization. Okay, I'll put a capital I. Now when it puts that, it doesn't know where to go. So it says immigration rate cannot be resolved to a variable. It tells me the location, which is important. If I double click on it, it will bring me to where that's used, this immigration rate, and the message will further be shown here. And I'd urge you to use these messages on the side of this, okay? Now in this case, it's very simple for me to correct. And if I correct that and I do build, it will say build completed successfully. AnyLogic version 6 has an occasional problem where sometimes it says build completed successfully, but it doesn't yet get rid of the problems up here. And you should realize if it says build completed successfully, it's working and those problems shouldn't be displayed. Another issue is that I had mentioned before, but bears noting, there's this option to filter the build window by what's currently selected. So for example, you can press this and it will only show things that are under problems within main. or I could select the whole model, and I could do this to only show things that are problematic within the model. Let me give you another example of a problem. Let's suppose I wanted immigration rate, but suppose I wanted to, I thought, oh, well, I'll name it immigration rate with a space. Sometimes it gives a marker immediately here that it's not a valid Java identifier, meaning it doesn't know how to make sense of it. And this is actually preventing me from even going to the build point. It's just telling me right here, which is a little bit misleading in here. It really should give an error in the problems window, but it's not even if I go build, it's not even getting to that point. It's just sort of complaining here. Similarly, if I put a build and birth rate or something like that, I tried to put an ampersand in there, it's going to be an unhappy camper, and it's going to tell me right away here that it's not a valid Java identifier. In other words, it doesn't know what that means in Java. So I need to sometimes bow to the Java compiler and just deal within its constraints. Okay, so these sort of errors can sometimes be fairly straightforward, like we've seen here. Sometimes they can be more challenging. So, for example, with this particular model, I could go into a method. Sometimes my problems might be in a so-called function, and I could put something nonsensical here. Maybe it's something like star or something like that. Maybe it's an accidental thing I pressed, and I'm going to close this up so that you can't see that anymore. And I'm going to try to say, okay, I'm going to build my model, and it'll say syntax error. What a syntax error means is it doesn't know it doesn't understand the grammar of what you're trying to do. It doesn't understand the structure of what you're trying to say there. And it says structure error and token, delete this token. In other words, clean this thing up. It doesn't know what it is, okay? So that can be a sort of error that can occur within your model, and it will, again, be pointing you to the place in this code that's causing it. Another point of help there, if I had put that back in, I should have noted that when you see that sort of build error, you'll notice that over here on the left-hand side, there's little X's applied. Do you see that? Little X's here. Those X's indicate where the error is. And you'll notice that it sort of sprinkles these in kind of a breadcrumb trail all the way back up to the so-called, to the enclosing project. So there's a little X indicating there's something wrong with the project. There's an X indicating something's wrong in main. Then X in functions indicating something's wrong with at least one function. And then there's an X associated with this particular function. Those X's are your friends. They clue you in that something is wrong and help you fix it sooner. So learn to respect them and to follow them. So this is an example of a sort of error that may occur in the context of your context of a bit of a function here. I'll show you another one. I'm opening this ABM model with birth death. As Carmel suggested, I'd like to refer people to this model because it illustrates a number of sort of common needs within modeling, including, incidentally, continuous time agents. So, continuous age agents, agents whose age is, not just divided into categories, but it could be 23.25, and they can, however fine you want it to be. So maybe you have certain types of concerns developmentally that requires you to look at neonates, very finely in their first few months of life. And then at other times the age categories are more broad. And this allows you to have whatever level of precision you want. You have agents who age in a continuous basis. But it also has a lot of other things associated with it, like vertical transmission and like simulation of birth and connecting up of babies into their mother's social network and stuff like that. Now, so in addition to many things in here, we could go look in main, for example, and we could find in the population here that we have some statistics, okay? So there's a statistic on infection, a count to live. And I could put an error here. For example, I could say item ... is alive, something like that. That could be the result of a problem with sort of typing something twice. And once again, it will take me back here in a way that will help me fix the thing at the level of the actual population statistic. Certain types of errors, and I don't know that I could cause this problem here. Well, maybe I could. Sure. So let's try throwing this to loop. I'm trying to find a case where AnyLogic is more, it causes more trouble in terms of finding an error. Okay, so here it actually was able to find it. It looks like it's pretty good. Occasionally what happens is it pops you into the actual underlying Java code where the error occurred. So instead you'd see something like this. I'll put that thing at the end there, and you'd see something like this. It pops you into this code because it doesn't know where to show you the specific thing going on, and you just have to realize that this code came from somewhere, figure out where it came from, and go fix it. Scott, yes?
Generally, you pop from Java code when you have a runtime error.
Well, but that, I'm coming to that later.
Yeah,
but
I see like 95% of the time,
yeah.
I don't get a Java code.
Sure. It does happen a lot, though, for beginners, because they don't know what's legal for a variable name, and they don't know when a semicolon is needed and stuff like that. So I recognize the fact that you may not, and others who are very experienced may not, but for beginners, I think it is still a stumbling block. And there are cases where it will pop you into the code like that, and you gotta kind of sleuth what it was. So if it pops you into code, try to figure out where that code came from. In other words, where was it that you had that code in your model? And one very a key sort of a key component is this of sleuthing this down is let's take that as an example. Let's suppose that it popped me not back to this place. Let's suppose that I had a little message here, and it popped me like this, right into code, and didn't even show me where it came from, which occasionally does happen. One thing you can do is you could search for this code. You could say, okay, I'm gonna search for this thing within my model using this edit, search, and replace, and you can do search, and you'll find, oh, it's used in this rate here. It's also referred to in a function, but it's used in this rate, and if I go click there, that will bring me to the place where it's actually defined, okay? One of the most common, as I noted before, one of the most common places that these things can occur is if you are confused about semicolons. Ladies and gentlemen, semicolons within AnyLogic AnyLogic makes attempts to try to tolerate them, even where they're not needed. For example, here, this is in this guard, I put a semicolon, and it tolerated it. There are cases where semicolons can be even left out of action statements, but in general, if it's something that determines a value, in other words, it's what we call an expression, like this sex equals this female, then you don't need a semicolon. If it's a statement after it, you do need a semicolon. So if there's something that needs to be performed, it needs to undertake some action, it needs to actually accomplish something, like here, perform birth, in general, you will need a semicolon. Sometimes AnyLogic inserts it for you, but sometimes you forget it, and it will just complain about it. Okay. So bear in mind that semicolons for beginners are a big cause of problems. If it's a statement, if it's something that performs some action, rather than computing a value, you probably need the semicolon there. If it's something that computes a value, you probably don't want a semicolon. Okay. Okay, so those are some pointers in terms of these build errors. If you see problems here They are cluing you in to things which should be fixed. Occasionally you'll see warnings, which are somewhat more optional, but if you see a lot of warnings, you should probably consult with someone who can interpret them if that's not something you can interpret directly. Okay, so this is basically AnyLogic checking your model before it gets to the stage of being able to run it. Some of these problems are that it's detected a real error. I'll give an example here. So maybe I do something really, really silly in my model. So maybe in a transition, I say something that's meaningless. So I assign a sex, an ethnicity to a sex. Now, because these are defined, as some people know, as enums, it will actually recognize this as a problem. And it'll say, cannot convert from here. And that means it realizes this doesn't make sense. I have to go fix it. It can't proceed without that. In other cases, it may just warn you there's real danger if you run this model that something may happen, like a divide by zero error will occur. And in that case, it will also behoove you to go fix it. It could let you run the model, but it's more stringent and says you got to, please fix this up. It's too risky. Okay, so these are some problems that come up in the build, the problems window. As Scott emphasized earlier in the boot camp, do not be overwhelmed by large numbers of things in the build menu. Try to avoid it by building very, very frequently. Whenever you make a small change, build. Small change, build. Once you've sort of completed that little small change, build it and see if it builds successfully. That will help prevent many things in the problems window, but occasionally you'll get one which just throws it off so completely it doesn't know what to do, and it'll just put a whole bunch of things in the build window. And concentrate on the first few ones of them, hopefully the first one by one, and keep on building. After you fix one, build, and maybe all the others will go away. Okay? So that's the build window. So I'm going to save this away.